Who dat to you, big dogs and daddies out there? And all you lovely ladies. We are 3-2. You got a positive record here as the New Orleans Saints. You've got a head coach with a positive winning record this season. Oh, man, what is that about? That's crazy. And you're coming off a 34-0 blowout in an era where there are NFL teams who've not had a blowout, shutout win in literally 2 to 3 decades. New Orleans they're winning. They're doing well. I mean, we would just say well, right? We don't want to jinx it. We don't say anything too crazy, too outlandish, but a win is a win. And even though the Comcast Devils kept us away from each other Sunday, we're here together today, or today. Wow, those are words. Talk about the Saints. Now, we're not really going to go over a recap, but we will talk about where New Orleans is at right now. But before we do that, we have a shout out to all those who are in the chat who come to the show live. For those who are listening on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, iHeart Radio, etc., welcome into the Who Dat Confessional podcast. We are live on Tuesdays and Thursdays, right around 7 p.m. Central Standard Time, 7:30, and following every game, Comcast, of course, permitting. And we are joined by the amazing Rainey, Matthew Richmond, AJ Grains, Christopher Rivera, Bradley Eskeen, Clarence McGee, Nikki DeFish, because we got to have the New Orleans Mafia represented in the house. Ace Garcia, Najee Blackmon, Travis Wilburn, Gundam, not sure which one, but one of them, Michael Borland, and everybody else coming into the channel tonight. And of course, we have shouted out to our Discord as well. So if you want to talk Who Dat Nation at all times, feel free to join us over there. Now, we'll go ahead and add that tonight I am going to be saying some things that many of you could maybe even call controversial. And I'm not trying to just stir up drama. I'm simply trying to acknowledge where the team is currently at and tell you who needs to improve and then who is doing maybe surprisingly worse than you would expect and who's doing better and why. I want to try to cover all those things. Now, I do feel like I have to preface some of these things because we live in a world of social media where if you say one thing, obviously you're saying a guy is either amazing or terrible at the same time. And I noticed this today when I made this following tweet. I'll read it off to you. Chris Olave has really struggled the past 2 games. I'm not sure if it's just a slump or what, but he's too good of a player to have some of the misses he's had for the Saints. I think Houston will be a good opportunity for him. Now, I said that, and underneath, let me just go ahead and explain some of the comments and replies I'm getting. I'm getting things like, Michael Thomas is the true number 1 at this point still. Michael Thomas is the guy. Hey, it's all because of the toe injury that he has. He's fine. There's all kinds of answers in here. And again, I don't want to get too specific because I don't want anybody being shamed. Like people bringing up, oh, he's running wrong routes. Well, technically, we don't know who's running wrong routes. We just simply know that routes are being run that are not efficient. We don't have Coach Burns here to tell us exactly what the splits are, nor P. Carmichael to show us the play designs to know specifically why we have this overlapping. Is it Michael Thomas? Is it Chris Olave? Is it just the wrong play call? Well, we don't really know the answer to that, but what we can say is Chris Olave has underperformed probably more than any other offensive player over the past 2 or 3 games. Now, that's where a lot of people kind of, they suck that wind into their teeth and they don't want to jump in on it. But let me go ahead and explain why I'm saying these things. Again, none of this is to hate on Olave. It's because I literally see him as being the best offensive playmaker on the team, yet he's not performing like that. So let me go ahead and give you some numbers as to why I say that. Offensively, targeting Chris Olave is currently resulting in a 69.7 quarterback rating. That is lower than what it is to target Michael Thomas, Alvin Kamara, Rashid Shaheed. Less than what's to target Kendre Miller. It's less than it is to target Taysom Hill in the offense right now. It goes beyond that, though. It's not just that as a metric. It's not just QB rating because interceptions, which have been thrown his way, and can't really blame all those on Olave, or honestly blame any of them on Olave, still reflect that. But let's go beyond that. How about a success rate? Now, successful reception is going to gain a minimum of 40% of the yards that gets you to a first down, or 60% that gets you to a second down, or 100% that can convert third or fourth downs. Now, if that sounds a little bit confusing, it's okay. Just know that we're going to be comparing it to his peers on the team. Chris Olave's success rate is 53.5%. Michael Thomas is 56.4%. And then Rashid Shaheed is 52.4%. Now, this isn't saying that Chris Olave is doing terrible, but we have Chris Olave after his rookie season on a very high standard. And we see him as a future superstar wide receiver and a star wide receiver right now. But these aren't the only numbers I have, by the way. It goes beyond that. Here's the biggest one that really gets to me. Both Michael Thomas and Rashid Shaheed are catching 66.7% of the passes thrown his way or thrown their way. Chris Olave is only receiving and successfully bringing in 58% of the passes thrown his way. By comparison, last year, and again, I think Chris Olave did fantastic last year. Last year, he was catching over 60% of the passes. So he's struggling more so than what we saw last year and where he was a rookie. Now, what would we call this, a sophomore slump? I guess it's kind of up to you as the fans on what you would want to do there. I can say that as I was watching tape from Chris Olave on Monday, yeah, there's those two plays on the sidelines. Number one, should he have managed to maintain the ball to catch that touchdown? I believe he should have. But even if you take that one out, there are multiple plays over the middle where he drops one, like goes to his hands. Now, we can for sure have the discussion about Derek Carr's ball placement not being perfect, and I think that's fine. But to me, that doesn't really matter when you're talking about a guy like Chris Olave. If we were going to talk about Keith Kirkwood, sure, you kind of need to have the best throw possible because Keith Kirkwood has not been the level that Chris Olave has shown. But Chris Olave is simply having misses that we're not used to seeing him do. And over the past couple of games, he's averaging less than 10 yards in the games over these past two, and his catch percentage has just completely dropped. And even if he does have that toe injury that we've talked about, because he was testing the toe before the New England Patriots game, that's fine. But the toe is not going to affect his ability to bring in the ball with his hands. That's not going to affect his ability to go and get the ball, even if it's thrown slightly behind him, slightly above him. That is going to be more of a concentration issue, or that's going to be more of an issue with the hands, not a foot injury. And again, I'm not trying to say that he's doing terrible, but through 5 games, Chris Olave has got 318 yards, which is respectable. Respectable. It's not amazing. It's respectable. If you were to divide that over a course of a full season, again, this is if you wanted to do it over a full season, he would still end up with right at 1,000 yards. He'd actually end up with 1,081 yards. But here's the wild thing, because I talked about coming into the season, how for me, an amazing year for Michael Thomas, like a true bounce back year for Michael Thomas would be for him to be around 750 to 850 yards receiving, right? Michael Thomas is on pace for right around 950 yards receiving. Michael Thomas is literally exceeding my expectations. The only negative to kind of throw Michael Thomas's way is he's not really made into the end zone yet, but truly I think that is kind of more of an issue with play calling, which did get better on Sunday. Not great, but it definitely improved, and that was really good to see. And hopefully that continues. So I guess all this point is to make is I'm going to talk about a lot of positives tonight, but I had to come in and say, hey, we've been what most of us would consider appropriately harsh on Pete Carmichael, right? Like we were appropriately harsh on him because he was not doing well, and hopefully he is better, right? That's what we all hope. So we were fair there. We did the same thing to Trevor Penning in the beginning, James Hurst in the beginning, saying what needs to get better, what is not happening, what's not right. And objectively, Chris Olave is not playing as a star wide receiver, and I would go even further to say that he is not currently playing as a number 1 receiver in the NFL. He is playing as a solid number 2 option. And the reason that is an issue is if you go and look at the play designs, Chris Olave is more often than not the number 1 read and the primary target. So it's not that Chris Olave is bad, but the team is treating him as the guy, right? And he's not fulfilling that role effectively. Now, he either needs to get his, together and do better, or the offense has to change what it is currently styling itself for. And if the offense is currently styling itself for Chris Olave to be the number 1, then maybe it needs to swap and go back to the guy who is proving TJ, one of our moderators here at the Hudak Confessional Discord, completely wrong, because TJ is adamant that Michael Thomas was trash and would never recover and never become anything. Well, Michael Thomas is shoving many footballs down TJ's throat right now. Hopefully, that continues in every regard that you can imagine that means. But whatever is the reason for Chris Olave's drop, which to me was the biggest negative leaving this game, needs to happen sooner rather than later. Hopefully, going against Houston is going to be the game that we need to see from him to bounce back and perform better. But right now, those are the two struggles we're seeing from Olave. You had an effort issue, and he admitted this effort issue, so it wasn't just like conjecture from fans saying, oh, he's taking reps off. he actually came out and said, yeah, I was doing things wrong there. So I respect him for owning up to it. Then this past game, he's dropping catches we've seen him make. And then Alvin Kamara called him out. Let me just be clear. I'm not hating. I'm not saying he's trash. And I do think he performed better than he is. But right now, there's not a stark difference between how Chris Olave is playing and how Rashid Shaheed is playing. And Rashid Shaheed is not a coveted number one receiver who came in with a full route tree and ready to go. Rashid has improved because Rashid Shaheed, FYI, currently on pace for around 700-800 yards. About what I thought he would be. I hope it continues. I hope he gets better. I hope he does even more. Right? Because his past 3 weeks have been very quiet. Over the past 3 weeks, he got about 50, right around 60-ish, 58-ish receiving yards. So he's come down a little bit. Hopefully he kicks back up. He's on pace to do better than I thought he would, or right around what I thought he would do this season. So you expect Chris Olave to do significantly better than Rashid Shaheed. We'll see how Houston comes around and how that game ends up playing it. But let me go into the positives now. I wanted to kind of get the negative one out of the way. If I had to pick the worst thing from Sunday's game, it was Chris Olave. And I guess if you're going to win 34-0, if you're going to completely dominate another team, if you have to pick somebody to have a negative game, I guess Chris Olave is good as any. Right? Now, King says, are you concerned more with Olave's attitude in the midst of the struggling offense over the past few weeks, or do you actually think he's regressing? First 2 games, he was amazing. So I think it's a mixed bag here. I do think that foot injury is going to play a degree of a role, but I think that what the foot injury would more do is maybe disrupt some of the speed to his route running and maybe his ability to create separation. Maybe it limits how much he can do in the 7 through 9 routes. Because as you said, his first 3 games, he was right around 300 total yards. Well, over the past 2 games, he's had 16 total yards and 3 catches. So you're right. This first 3 games, we didn't see these problems. Is it concerning to see the attitude that quickly? Maybe a little bit, but I'd also say that a big issue for a lot of these big name guys who come into the league, especially in the first round, is they're used to winning, right? They're not used to having to deal with losing. If you played for Ohio State, if you played for, most, generally speaking, LSU in recent years, Alabama, etc., you're used to winning. You're not used to losing. You want to see all the dancing and the craziness in the locker rooms after the game. You want to be part of that. You just see, hey, I want to keep winning. I've won my whole life. I was winning in high school. I was winning in college. Surely I go to the NFL and we're going to win every week. Not how it works, young blood, which is why the veterans had to come to him and say, hey, you can't do what you're doing right now. This is not acceptable. And I appreciate the accountability that he's getting from guys like Alvin Kamara, who, by the way, what Alvin Kamara is doing as a leader this year is not getting spoken enough by other media members. I'm not calling anybody out, but people really need to speak about how important Alvin Kamara's voice has been since his return. I realize that New Orleans lost last week, not this past Sunday, but the week before. But in the return, Alvin Kamara's voice has been critical to this team having a chance of turning around a poor offensive performance. He is, in my opinion, the most important thing that's happened to this offense this year, because he's come in and he's been a guy willing to go to Pete and say, this ain't right. He's gone to Ronald Curry, said, we need to run this play. He's going to individual players and holding them accountable. What he's doing as a leader needs to get more coverage. But anyway, that's neither here nor there, I guess. He's having a positive impact on the field as well. You can get, you can look at the yards per carry, and I just want to say this. I think the yards per carry is the most deceiving stat for a running back. Can it indicate a running back is good? Yes, it can. However, like any stat, context is needed. So what I ended up doing is Monday, I actually posted some numbers I wanted everybody to see to show what Alvin Kamara was doing just from a numbers standpoint. Alvin Kamara is averaging 3.7 yards before contact. Now, the immediate, again, context is so huge here. The immediate thought would be, oh, well, the offensive line is blocking better. Yes, they are, because they're running more outside, inside zone, split zone, etc. But it's not just that. For example, Jamal Williams is averaging 1.6 yards before contact. Alvin Kamara simply has greater speed to the hole. He reads the hole better and has amazing explosion, and that's always been a thing for him. But it goes beyond that. He's also forcing a broken tackle about every 16 rushing attempts. How does that compare against other guys around the league? Well, Jamal Williams is forcing a broken tackle about every 27 attempts. Christian McCaffrey about every 24 attempts, Derrick Henry about every 21 attempts, and Zach Moss, who's probably the most people's number one running back so far this year, once every 44 attempts. It goes beyond that. Alvin Kamara is forcing a first down about every 4.5 rushes. Jamal Williams was 3 first downs every 27 attempts was every 9 rushes. A little bit rougher there. Chris McCaffrey is averaging every 3.5 rushes. Derrick Henry, a first down every 5 rushes. And then Zach Moss, 1 every 3.7 rushes. So, AK is not only being a great leader, he's also being a great player on the field that is helping this offense. And I still say that after reviewing the tape, he's not even getting all the opportunities you expect from an AK to get. You're not seeing him in the passing game just quite yet of what you're wanting him to be. And I don't think that's on him. Again, I think this goes back a lot. This is going to come back to play calling. We've been harping on it for going on 2 months now. And I'll just be honest, that harp's probably not going to get restrung anytime soon. We're going to keep playing the same chords over and over until we actually see change. But I am very excited about what Alvin Kamara is doing so far. So if you're looking for some of the things that make you excited, whether it's a win or a loss, the things that are making this team better, Alvin Kamara is certainly up there. Certainly up there. And there are other great guys who are trying as well. And I also put out on social media, I was talking about, what makes this team so special is a lot of teams that are struggling in that middling area, whether they're a 500 team or they're a losing team, is you can see the locker room kind of fracture and splinter a little bit. But that's definitely not been the case here. Defensively, it's obvious. I did share out a clip on Twitter where I showed Paulson Adebo with one of his PBUs. And honestly, every Paulson Adebo PBU that was on the Saints sideline, the first person to get excited and greet him was Isaac Item, who was replacing him, obviously. And we talked about he was doing so well when he was on the field. That's how you see an amazing culture for a team when you don't care if you're the backup as long as the team is dominating. So you love that. But offensively, you're also seeing the same thing for Michael Thomas. Michael Thomas, as a veteran, is one of those, it doesn't matter if he's getting the ball or not. He is definitely there to find a way to encourage, to be there. I mean, when Foster Moreau scored, Alvin Kamara right there. Michael Thomas right there. These are a group of veterans who are having an impact in a way that we haven't needed to see in a while. And then what I mean by that is when Drew was here, Drew was that guy. And Sean Payton was kind of that guy because he was definitely a more demonstrative personality at head coach than Dennis Allen is. Now, Dennis Allen this year is certainly more in that vein. And I've seen people on social media, especially the Facebook, trash Dennis Allen, say, oh, he's a weak, timid demeanor. And that might have been the case the first half of the season last year. But that's not been this year, right? That's not been this year. He's definitely been more of what a lot of fans want him to be. But at the same time, he's still him, right? So you're seeing a lot of good things happen that I'm hoping help continue to push some of that change, because we talked about leading through the first 4 weeks, the New Orleans Saints were only running motion on about 1% of their plays, about 1.5%, and that number went up drastically. Now, in turn, and I hope this doesn't turn into something that Pete Carmichael uses as a reason to not run more motion, but one thing that the New Orleans Saints also kicked up in was pre-snap penalties. This is actually a big issue with them this past week. I'm hoping that doesn't get used as an excuse to get away from all that motion. I just simply think that the team needs to get used to using all that motion because they simply weren't, right? They were mostly a static team. So and the benefit of a static team, FYI, the benefit of a static team is you are generally not going to have to deal with as many penalties. You're going to eliminate most pre-snap penalties. I mean, by default, it's kind of obvious, right? You're going to eliminate pre-snap penalties. And what we're seeing beyond that, though, is you can do that, and sure, you may play a little bit fundamentally safer, but you're certainly hurting the team as defenses are able to take a much better position against you. So what we saw this, final week against New England, it was called the 5th week, because this is a big, usually we judge games every 4 games. We're kind of doing every 5 now with the change to the schedule. But in terms of penalties, way too many pre-snaps. I'm hoping that the more they run these, the better that will get going. But you can't have 12 penalties in a game. That's a huge negative. And we'll have to just wait and see if that actually gets corrected, if that actually gets fixed. But as of now, that is something that I would really, really prefer New Orleans to fix. Now, to go ahead and rattle off some of those penalties for you. Here, let's go for illegal formation. That was one in the first quarter. That was a pain. False start in the first quarter. That was a pain. Oh, another false start in the first quarter. That's a pain. Oh, another false start in the second quarter. That's a pain. Oh, another false start in the third quarter. That's a pain. Oh, a delay of game penalty. Anyway, the point I'm making, hopefully this doesn't get put into a position where we do less motion, because we still haven't really worked in play action for Derek Carr, and Derek Carr has always dominated with play action. We still have not seen a an effective motion get add in that is to the level of what you say from like Miami or Kansas City or even Detroit. But it was improved, and we'll just continue to watch that. Dupree says it seems like Breezy starting to get double teams. The defensive tackles typically get double teams, or is that a sign the coaches are respecting his impact? A little bit of both. Honestly, it's going to be easier to notice because with a 4-man rush, somebody's getting doubled depending on the blocking style. Now, we talked about blocking style in yesterday's film study. If you haven't checked out the film study I did on Carl Granderson, we did a lot of, kind of breaking in some of the basics of offensive and defensive line play. If you haven't checked it out, I really encourage you to. We also did a video on Brian Brzee, how much he's improved, and we did that one last week. And sadly, not all people watch that film study, but I think it's very important. And if you want to, check out why he might be demanding some double teams, go check that video out. But it's a mix of both. The truth is, it depends on how the teams are going to call it. So if you have a team that likes to use a lot of slide protection, well, that means you're probably going to end up having like a natural double team, but you're not specifically calling for a double team because of, Bryant, right? You might be doing it because you see a heavy load in front on the left side that you're ready for an incoming blitz. And you could also do something that's called Bob. Now, if you see a double team in Bob, that is usually pretty targeted. Bob simply means big on big, which means that you're going to have a dedicated guy that you're responsible for. That's what a Bob is in terms of pass pro. And then you have a combo, which is going to be maybe half zone between like tackle through center, and then the opposite side is going to be Bob. It's going to be a little bit of combination run there. So it just depends on what the calls are. Is he having an effect? He is. Is he doing it to the level of like crazy Aaron Donald, maybe even a Jalen Carter with Philly? Not quite there yet. But there are definitely some reps where New Orleans has put him in some advantageous positions, and teams are starting to recognize that's happening and trying to prepare against it. The only problem with that is Cameron Jordan doing fantastic. Now, Cameron Jordan is not who he was 5 years ago. Cameron Jordan is still a very good pass rusher, elite run defender, and when he's not being double teamed, he brings in a lot of pressure, which is what he actually did against New England. And it sucks because if there's one thing, I know some of my longtime followers are about to freak out, but I've told y'all I like advanced analytics. One of the things I actually do like about PFF, and I agree with him on, is I hate the half stat sack. It makes no sense because Cameron Jordan has now had sacks in 2 games, but it reads as he's only got 1 sack, making it look far worse than he actually is. But if you go beyond that, you start looking at who's pressuring the quarterback more for this team. Cameron Jordan actually leads the team in pressures, even though Carl Granderson has a significant lead in sacks. Carl Granderson has 3.5 sacks, which is fantastic for him, by the way. I'm very excited to see his performance. Again, check out the film study yesterday. If you haven't, check it out. I really do think you'll enjoy it. But currently, Carl Granderson's on pace for about 12 sacks, whereas Cameron Jordan's on pace for like 4. And the truth is, though, Cameron Jordan is significantly impacting offensive lines when he's not being chipped and double teamed all the time with pressures. One that comes to mind is Carl Granderson's individual sack against New England. Well, Cameron Jordan actually won first, and then Carl Granderson cleaned up, right? And again, that's not taking away from Granderson because you would have seen that play if you watched the film study. Granderson won as well, but Cam simply won first. That doesn't mean that either of them was like better, worse, etc. Just one won first, started the flush, and then Cameron Jordan ended up getting some help, and it was cleaned up by Carl Granderson, which is fantastic. You want to see that. So it's one of those where you have a guy like Brzee in the interior can start demanding some attention. You have a guy like Carl Granderson, who I believe is your best pass rusher on the team and arguably maybe your best total defensive lineman. I'd still probably put Cam ahead in terms of just being well-rounded. In terms of pass rush, Granderson's number 1. So when you have, threats coming from multiple angles, and then you have the effect of this team being a very good team when it comes to running the twist and stunt game, well, then you're going to start getting some of the things you're seeing, Caprice, with double teams and it moving it around, which opens up opportunities for other people. The only thing is you got to keep it consistent because you didn't have that level of consistency against Tampa Bay. I will say that Tampa Bay has a very good offensive line, but you didn't have that against Tampa, and it showed how it affected the rest of the team. But that was a very long-winded way to answer, but it's still a positive because defensive line has been fantastic. Really fun to watch. Really fun to break down the film, and the technique improvement has been great. And what's crazy is the tech, for example, on Carl Granderson, like one thing that he used to do as a newer player that I was like, wow, I can't believe he's doing that as a UDFA, and he's coming in and he's showing this move. He used to do the ghost technique, which Von Miller made famous. Well, hell, we won't even see him even using that yesterday, yet he's still having the effect that he was. So you're seeing some players develop on that Saints defensive line that have technique that is just so well rounded, and they've got a full tool chest. And as long as they can find a level of consistency, this team is going to continue to get better and better. And I'm also curious to see, the blitz numbers as they continue to go. Currently, Pete Warner is leading the team in blitzing, but usually what Pete Warner is getting asked to do in the film study I made last week, I kind of showed some of this. Again, y'all need to really watch the film if you haven't already. But they're using him a lot as a clear guy into the twist stunt game. So all of these things are, compounded together, and all this context comes together to really just say one thing. The Saints defensive line is playing really well. I would like to see them get better, of course, but they are playing really well, and I think credit should be given to them for that. Do want to see some more capitalization, though. For example, there are definitely some opportunities that Cam has to capitalize on, right? There are definitely some opportunities where Tano could capitalize more than he has with his half sack. But overall, man, definitely been pretty nice. Definitely been pretty nice. And I think the tape has shown that. We're definitely talking about an area that we knew was going to be strong. It does help that you have a really good secondary. In the linebacker core, I was actually talking to, another coach. He coaches college and high school ball. Well, he's done both. He does not the NFL level is the point I'm making. But I was still talking to him about, some of these. Actually, a couple great, coaches you can find on Twitter who will go back and forth with you. I was talking about the improvement of Zach Ball and how Zach Ball has quietly become, for the amount of play that he has, solid. He really has, y'all. He's not missed a tackle this year. He's been a starter for 3 of the games. But in terms of snap counts, that's going to be the key for him. Because remember, they don't use that strong side too often. But one thing I did notice, they use him even as the weak side against old Bill Belichick. But he's averaging about 20% of the snaps so far this year. That's not a high order. But in terms of he's come in 20% of the defensive snaps this year and not been a liability. Now, he's not popping off the page looking fantastic. I'm not arguing that. But a lot of people have been asking, why is Jalen Smith not on this roster? Because Zach Ball is actually playing solid. And, of course, he is an elite special teamer for this team, whereas Jalen Smith would not be doing that. If we're talking about just pure who would be a better linebacker, well, I would say Jalen Smith based on what I saw in the preseason. But in terms of what he's doing, just to give a little bit of hey, take notice, maybe watch him a little bit, he's actually done better than you might have expected. I have a play. Let me see if I can find it real quick for y'all. I want to show y'all an example of what I'm saying for those who watch visually. I know not everybody can watch the channel, but I do want to put a play on the screen so that y'all can see kind of what I'm seeing when I say stuff like that. Again, I'm not trying to get too crazy and hey, he's actually amazing now. He finally found it. I'm not saying he finally found it to that degree, but I am saying you watch a play like this. I'm going to put it on the screen. I tweeted this one out. He is on the strong side, and he's flowing and breathing and breaking through these tackles. He's showing great contact balance, playing through contact, good play strength, great job with a long arm, fighting through a hold. It's not like you're seeing him make these plays that are absolutely incredible or huge playmakers. But what he's doing the job fundamentally well. And that's really all you need from him, is just to be a fundamentally decent guy. Just don't be trash. Right. And that's kind of like what we saw in that Green Bay game last year where he wasn't looking good. So that is a good positive to see, right? You want to see stuff like that. So shout out to him. Also showing a little bit of that growth and being part of this top 5 and, in my opinion, top 3 NFL defense. But I don't care where people want to put it. They are in that top echelon as a team. And in most statistics, they're in top 10 everywhere. They're underrated, though. I mean, they're number 4 in points allowed. They're number 4 in yards allowed. The team is number 11 in turnover margin. They're just looking good. Right? So it's good to see that happening at every level. I can say that we're at the point right now where there's nobody on defense that is a true liability. Now, that doesn't mean that everybody's a great player. Let me be very clear. I'm not saying that everybody is playing at a ridiculously high level and they're the best at their position. But what I am saying is, there is not a singular player that you can just consistently go to every game and go, target him. That's the guy we go after. Now, there might be matchups for other teams. They'll say, hey, I believe we can beat Vaughn here, or I believe we can beat Alontae Taylor here. But what makes this defense so fun to watch right now, if you are a film guy or if you're just an analyst or you're just a fan who wants to have more depth into it, this defense doesn't have a weak spot. It doesn't have elite at every spot, but it doesn't have a weak spot. And that's something that really sets this New Orleans defense apart from most of the teams across the NFL. And it makes it very exciting. To throw out some more numbers of where they're at, I put this out again. advanced analytics have their place, is especially when you combine it with film. I'm really big on that. If you're going to use advanced analytics, make sure you are using film as well. Don't just choose one or the other. They both need each other. But here's where the Saints, through 5 games, ranked. Overall defense, they are 4th in DVOA. Special teams are 3rd in DVOA, and offense is 23rd. But it should be noted that the offense is 23rd is an improvement over where they were, because the overall DVOA ranking, DVOA in terms of being an analytic, has been a very useful tool in the past to try to predict a team's ability and success moving forward. It's not perfect, but it is a useful tool. New Orleans Saints are 10th overall in the league right now in DVOA. But here's the big catch. Before New England, they were 18th. So that's how well the offense improved in one game. Just to give you an analytic, it moved the team up 8 overall spots in a singular week. Big key, obviously, is being consistent and keeping that. I would then throw this one out, because I saw this a lot this week, and I will agree that this is not a false statement. The Patriots are not a good team, right? We all just go ahead and put it out there, right? The Patriots are not a good football team this year. They're not. But the New England Patriots defense is 8th in the NFL in yards allowed, right? The New England Patriots issue is that the offense sucks donkey balls, just straight up. Straight up. Just say that they're Bills balls right now. Whether they're Bill Belichick or the Buffalo Bills, either way, they're sucking. But that has nothing to do with the Patriots defense, which is still decent, right? Like their defense is going to struggle because the offense is terrible, but they're not the worst defense in the league by a stretch, right? They're not the Denver Broncos. And yet the offense was able to move. The offense was able to score in the red zone. The offense was able to be effective. So you saw a significant improvement, and that's why a lot of these analytics are like, whoa, hey, New Orleans offense isn't terrible now because of that. It's all relative, and it's all one game. But the Patriots have really decent coaching. They have a good defense. And then the offensive quarterback situation, they're in hell. And I feel semi-bad for them, but at the same time I don't, because the New Orleans Saints went 3 for 4 in the red zone. Thank God. And even though they sucked on 3rd down, again, pointing to the Patriots defense not being utter garbage, when they got down into the red zone, they scored mostly touchdowns. So, we like that. All this to say, this is why you saw improvement in all these rankings across all these analysts' desks for the Saints office. Now it just needs to continue. That's the key. It just needs to keep going. Dream says, I can't believe we're doing this. It was the Patriots, not the 49ers. And what I don't understand is why people just discount that. There is no more competitive sport in terms of the professional teams than football. In baseball, you can literally buy a record. Now, it doesn't mean you're just going to win it all, but you can go out in free agency with no salary cap and buy the team that you want, and you will win at least 90, 100 games. You can buy that amount of games and make it the playoffs. Hockey. You are going to just have teams that are consistently dominant, and every now and then a wrench gets thrown into it, but it is difficult to maintain the level of parity the NFL has. And then obviously the NBA, we see the same thing happening. Super teams, super teams, super teams. The only thing that people care about in the NBA, big markets, man, super teams. The NFL is literally a team or literally a game where any team can beat you any Sunday. And it's not like the Patriots have the number 32 ranked defense. The Patriots defense is not Denver. And the key is you knew that the Saints defense was going to shut down the Patriots offense. Like nobody went into the game thinking the Saints defense was going to be pressured by the Patriots offense. The question was, could the Saints offense do anything versus, just say an average defense? Like, can they actually show improvement in movement, or are they going to have to play the worst teams in the NFL every week? Well, they did exactly what they needed to do. They took on a defense that wasn't the worst in the league, and they performed well. And that's all you needed them to do. So, again, this is all just to say, we should give them credit for that, and we should talk about it as a good thing because it matters. Now, as I already said, consistency is key, right? Consistency is key. You've got to continue to push through that and continue to replicate that success, because last year the New Orleans Saints shut somebody out too and then continued to drop, offensive trash bombs for the next couple weeks. So it is still one game. Consistency is the key. But that doesn't mean we discount what went down. And I think if you're a Saints fan, that's you have to really hope that all the positives that you're seeing will continue into further success. I mean, that's the whole point of looking at it, right? You can be a negative fan if you